Rolling forward. So welcome everyone to the League of Canadian Poets and Freedom to Read Week 2022's event Into Words, featuring Brandon Wint, Terese Mason Pierre, and Bertrand Bickersteth. Thank you everyone for being here with us. I'm going to get started with the land acknowledgement, as we typically do. The League of Canadian Poets would like to acknowledge that our organization is situated upon traditional territories. The territories include the Wendat, Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. The treaty that was assigned for this particular set of lands is collectively referred to as the Toronto Purchase and applies to the lands east of Browns Line to Woodbine Avenue north towards Newmarket. The League of Canadian Poets recognizes the enduring presence of Indigenous people on this land. The League also recognizes that art, poetry, and poetic practice are endemic to the work of our organization, as well as Indigenous cultures and people. We encourage everyone here today to learn more about the treaties and histories of Indigenous people tied to the lands where you live and work. I would also encourage you to, more than a land acknowledgement in the chat, but to donate your time, resources, and funds to Indigenous communities and other grassroots organizations in your community. All right. Oh, got a couple people here in the waiting room. All right. And now I'll introduce our lovely guests today. So Brandon Wint, our moderator. Brandon Wint is an Ontario-born poet and spoken word artist who uses poetry to attend to the joy and devastation and inequity associated with this era of human and ecological history. For Brandon, the written and spoken word is a tool for examining and enacting his sense of justice and imagining less violent futures for himself and the world he has inherited. For more than a decade, Brandon has been sought after touring performer and has presented his work in the United States, Australia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Jamaica. His poems and essays have been published in national anthologies, including The Great Black North, Contemporary African Canadian Poetry, published by Frontenac House, and Black Writers Matter, which is from the University of Regina Press. Divine Animal is his debut book of poetry. And our panelists this evening are Bertrand Bickersteth. Bertrand Bickersteth is a poet, playwright, essayist, and educator who was born in Sierra Leone and raised in Alberta. His collection of poetry, The Response of Weeds, was a finalist for multiple awards and won both the League of Canadian Poets Gerald Lampert Memorial Award and the Writers Guild of Alberta's Stephen G. Stephenson Award for Poetry. His writing has appeared in many places, including Geist, the Malahat Review, The Walrus, The Sprawl, and the CBC project Black on the Prairies. He lives in Calgary, teaches at Olds College, and writes about Black identity on the prairies. Bertrand is currently working on a collection of poems about Black cowboys. That sounds pretty cool. Terese Mason Pierre is a writer and poet whose work has appeared in The Walrus, The Fiddlehead, at Quill and Choir, Fantasy Magazine, and elsewhere online and in print. Her work has been nominated for the Elgin Award, the BP Nicol Chapbook Award, and Best of the Net. She is the co-editor-in-chief of Augur Magazine, a Canadian speculative literature journal, and she is the author of the chapbooks Surface Area from Anstruther Press and Manifest from Gap Riot Press. Terese lives and works in Toronto. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for the reminder from our guest that I turned on live transcription. We do have that available for this event. So I'll just mention that if you would like to activate it on your individual devices. And with that, I will pass the baton to Brandon, who will take us from here. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Thank you, Laura. Such a blessing to be here. So grateful that the Canadian League of Poets was gracious enough to invite us all to be here. So good to meet you both, poets, virtually and otherwise. Looking forward. I mean, the conversation we had before this event started was rousing enough, so so I imagine we're about to jump into a lovely conversation. Yeah, it's interesting thinking about where to begin, because I had a certain place I wanted to begin, and then I heard your lovely, robust biographies, and I was like, maybe we can start in a different place, because you're both such accomplished writers and leaders in your own right. And so I guess, given the context that we're sitting in, this being the Canadian League of Poets, I'm interested in the trajectory of, let's say, where you started as writers in Canada? So like perhaps like your conceptions of Can Lit or Canadian literature or whatever this like amorphous space was when you were starting versus like how you find it now, or like the trajectory of like stepping into this space and becoming leaders or somewhat accomplished writers in your own right. Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
I can go first.
Mm.
And please let me know if I'm echoing or anything like that. So I kind of came into this space, I want to say in 2017. I haven't been here. I've been here for like a second. And it was mostly through, I used to edit this journal called Young Voices, which is a journal published by the Public Library here in Toronto that's been around for over 50 years. And they publish like youth writing. And it's really interesting to see like, you know, how old it is and what the youth were thinking back in like, you know, the 80s and the 70s. Anyway, so part of that kind of programming, they would bring in authors, Canadian Toronto authors, to talk to youth. And then that's kind of where I sort of learned that there was like a broader community of writers like in the city I was living in. I hadn't really explored much before then. So through that programming and through actually meeting authors, like it meant a lot to actually like meet people who published books and get my book signed and things like that. I started to go to more events and meet other people. And my writing became, it started off as like, you know, writing for myself. And, you know, I didn't really mind like where it went or what I wanted to do with it. But then as I sort of discovered this new community, and I was like, well, I want to do something with my writing in regards to how my work is viewed and how I can share my work with others. So I just kept, like from 2017 to like present day, I just kept going to events and supporting other emerging writers and taking editing positions because I want to help, you know, writers as well too. And that's kind of like where I got to where I am today, and I really love it, and I hope to continue to be a part of the space.
Wonderful.
Very nice, succinct answer. Sure, I hope I can be as succinct as you were, Terese. I hate to do this, but I'm going to go all the way back to my childhood. And when I was very young, my mother tells me that I was always writing. And this surprises me because I didn't realize that. I know that I was a aspiring writer when I was in junior high school, and you know, I would write that kind of teenage crappy poetry and that sort of thing that everyone goes through. But she said no, I was always writing things from the beginning, from when I first started learning how to write. And while this surprises me, it also reassures me, because for the rest of my life, all of the examples that were given to me were of the possibility of me becoming maybe an athlete, a comedian, definitely. Oh, you could be very funny. And, you know, things like that, right? So it was very limited, but there was nothing in there about using your intellect or being able to write or anything like that. And so when I first went to university, I went to science because I have immigrants for parents, and, you know, that's just what you do, right? And hated every moment of it, flunked out, eventually regrouped and went back years later. This is a big flash forward, went back and took literature because that did feel natural to me. But then, even then, all of the literature I learned was, as you were suggesting, Brandon, it's Can Lit. And it's, you know, it's every white man who was dead before 1960, and then, you know, every white person after that. And I don't even believe we read any Black authors at all. I was an English major, my entire major, we read one Dion Brand essay, my entire major. On top of that, I went to UBC, and there were no Black instructors, no Black profs there. I had one substitute or guest speaker, she was really, who came in, and she was a Black woman. She was the only one who I had, again, 4 years of education. And so the message that was being sent to me my entire life, even when I actively tried to enter that space, was this is not a space for you. Luckily, I did persevere, but I did so by leaving. I just instinctively felt that this Canadian space was not offering me what I needed. So I went to the UK, and I did graduate school at University of London, but it was at a college called the School of Oriental and African Studies. And everybody who goes there is like anti-Western and lefties. And, you know, I studied African literature and Arabic literature, and it was fantastic. Everybody who was there was just interested in that sort of thing. And that really opened my eyes. It really did. And so then I got a job teaching in the US, and I was teaching African literature, and I was immersed in that. And it felt very good, but there was this other part of me that was absolutely not acknowledged. And this is my prairie self. And for years, I didn't even want to go there because I felt like it never acknowledged me. Why do I need to acknowledge it? But as fate would have it, I chose to come back to the prairies to live here. And when I was here, because I had gained all this knowledge and because I'd had all these experiences that legitimized my Black identity and the possibility or the potential for Blackness to occupy those intellectual spaces, I started to look for ways to insert myself. I simply decided that, you know, if this place is not going to allow me in, I'm going to break in, right? They think I'm a criminal, fine, here I go, right? And so I started to consciously try to find ways of writing myself into Alberta. I will point out that I was always writing and I would submit things and nobody was all that interested in it. And then fairly recently, people started to become interested in these things. And so, yeah, my writing took off from there. But it was a long process of not feeling legitimate at all. And I wanted to give you that whole story because, you know, Terese, you say that you've just only been here for a second, right? I've not been in the official sphere for that long either. I mean, I am very old, right? And I kind of blame, Canada and that whole discourse of Black cannot be intellectual, cannot be writer, for hindering me, for me having to eventually break my way in before I could do it. So I'll stop there. Sorry, I was not as succinct. Sorry.
No, but at least that's profound. Yeah, I mean, I love the long form. So thank you for that thorough answer as well. It's a nice segue into my next question, which is sort of, you know, as a Black writer myself and as someone who obviously self-identifies as such, I'm thinking about Blackness a lot. Not because it like occurs to me like every day when I wake up in the morning, like, oh, my Black self, but because there's like, there's an allure in the projection of Blackness in a certain way, or like, there can be a cachet or something to write into, depending on how we identify ourselves. And like this identifier of Blackness seems to be one of the most readily available for me. So I'm wondering, for each of you, you know, given the space that we're in, given that it's Black History Month, given that we're here under the auspices of like, this is, you know, Black writers talking about being Black writers. I'm wondering whether Blackness itself is like a generative idea, positionality for you. Is it contestable? Is there tension in it? I mean, particularly as writers, you don't have to talk about like, as a human being, my Blackness feels X, Y, Z, but like just this notion of being a Black writer, is there a generative quality to it, or does it come with discomforts as well?
That's a great question. I love that question. Specifically for writing, I have like several different kinds of answers for this because I write in different forms. So I'm like, what Blackness is a poet, and the Blackness is a fiction writer, and the Blackness is like a speculative fiction writer and a speculative poet. So like, what does that mean? So for me, just I think more broadly, it's a space of, you know, exploration and celebration. I had this moment. I don't know if like all Black writers have this moment where like, and like you talked about this earlier, Bertrand, about like the things you were reading were like, you know, there's white authors and like white characters, and that experience that is not, you know, it's like letting you know that you're not really welcome here. And I experienced something like this also very recently, particularly in regards to all the speculative literature that I do. Like I did not know who Octavia Butler was until like 2016. Like just no one it never occurred to me that, there were Black women writing in this genre. And that was having to like sort of reckon with that whilst also being a Black woman writing in that genre, like since childhood. Like I loved magic. I loved, all that stuff. Was very painful. And then I tried to find, okay, well, what's the best way to use or to transform this anger and this pain, and it was through writing. So it was kind of like a I wouldn't say it was like a switch, but I now write. I write into Blackness as a space of joy. Like all my characters are. My main characters are Black now. I'm interested in like writing about Black lives and moving away from the idea that there is only one kind of way to be Black, or one I guess worthy way to be Black if you want to be recognized by the mainstream. And in that way, it's a site of resistance. But I'm still trying to center, and I want to center joy and freedom and comfort. Specifically within speculative literature, within like poetry, for example, I've always been very, aware of Black poets, Black female. I grew up reading like Maya Angelou and other people, and I was like, oh, I'm pretty good. I can do that. I have people who I know who came before me, who I can read, who I can interact with and engage with. But it was more the speculative literature that I didn't really see myself. And I'm now at this point, I'm trying to explore and find new ways to just have fun. And it's something that I really love. So I also I wouldn't say that I wake up in the morning and be like, oh, how can I, write a story about a Black vampire today? It's not always like that. But I'm insisting on joy.
That's beautiful. That's yeah, fantastic. And may you bring all that joy to your writing forevermore. That's fantastic. There's so much that Terese has just said that resonates with me. There's so much of it. For me, Brandon, it is a generative space, I think, in terms of writing. I think it is. And that's because for me, it's a response. It's a reaction to my upbringing here. So Terese mentions, not even being aware of Octavia Butler until, just a few years ago. And that's in the space that she works. That's not her fault. I don't see that as her fault at all. I experienced that here through history, and most of us do here as well through history. It's because we have been constructed in a particular way that absents us, and then that makes us absent from the information that would help us or that would benefit us. And that's just seen as normal. And that's what happens to us. So here, when I was growing up, there's no such thing as Black history. I mean, white people started everything, they did everything. And so it's almost just a natural progression that when you go to university and you only see white instructors, that's what you see. And you only learn about white literature, and it's just all makes sense, right? But that's a construction. And I think part of that construction is and here, I'm sorry, it's my so-ass lefty persona coming out again, but it's in the construction of Canada and this entire continent, frankly, as this sort of colonial settler project of conquesting territory. And I think the Blackness was conceived in and was part of the aftermath of that conception of conquest. And so we're going to take these people from Africa and we're going to use them as our tools and do things. And that makes those people not quite people, but a sort of wrongful presence. And that wrongful presence is what we inherit even to this day, that we don't belong in those spaces. We're wrongful somehow. And the histories that I learned here were whitewashed. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. I mean, they were whitewashed. And so for me, I try to insert or reinsert that Black history that is there. That's what my writing impetus is. So in my poetry, I try to bring back that history that was whitewashed, that was taken out. And in my essays, I try to do that as well. My plays, the same thing. So I absolutely admire and I respect Terese has got like sort of a different trajectory for her different genres. And, we all work differently. Mine is, I've got a single trajectory that I apply to all these different things. And it is me, the historian, because I'm reacting to that erasure that has happened before. And I want to fill it with the Blackness that has already always been there, but everyone around me was not aware of that.
Oh, I'm so grateful. What a relief to hear these words from both of you. If I can be honest, you know, sometimes the moderator's hat has to be on like snug and serious, but I'm just happy to be a listening presence. I have so many questions as a way of like following up on the richness of both of those responses. I guess I'll pose the same question to both of you, which is like, what has that recentering of Blackness in your writing done to your like writer's imagination? So like, I imagine, or like what I'm hearing is that like the recentering of Blackness, you know, writing Black characters or repositioning Black history such that it constitutes the forefront of you know, the subject matter of whatever's being written. I'm wondering whether that intentionality brings about like different choices within your imagination or like different possibilities. How did it change your trajectory as writers when you decided consciously like, oh, this is what I'm going to do? Or like, you know, for you, Bertrand, like when you fully understood perhaps what you were writing towards or what you were writing in opposition to, how it shifted the nature of the things that you put on the page, if that makes sense.
This time I will be as brief as I can. It's a very straightforward answer for me this time. I recognized that I wanted to try to find ways in my writing to discern and describe and redefine the language of the prairies, the language of the prairies. And so that's what I set out to do. I would seek out the figures, the metaphors, the wordings that have traditionally been used to describe the prairies and that have automatically absented Blackness. And I twist them, I turn them around, I break into them, I re-articulate them so that we are now present in them. And there's just one other thing I was going to say. I just slipped my mind. Oh, shoot. That's, you know, it's okay. I ramble on too much anyway. Okay, so I'm sure I can think of it afterwards and with another question and talk about it then. But yeah, so that's, oh, I remember. It actually had an impact on how I viewed the prairies. So my writing actually changed how I thought about the prairies. And that was a huge, unexpected, but very positive bonus. To be perfectly honest, I used to hate this place. And I still am ambivalent, but I wasn't ambivalent before. I just hated it. And I had no intention of ever coming back here because I felt it's the place that rejected me. I don't want to be, I'll just reject it right back. Now, interestingly, I'm finding myself not necessarily enjoying the prairies, but I find that I do feel a sense of legitimate presence now. I don't feel as though I have to dig down deep to fight to find that feeling. I feel as though when I see, for example, a cattle brand, and I used to feel completely excluded by cowboy language, right? Now I see ways of thinking about the symbol and thinking about the way of expressing those letters that can articulate my presence here. I have discovered Black cowboys who have cattle brands themselves. And now when I see their shapes around, I think to myself, yeah, we have been here before, right? So that is a legitimate presence for me. So I'll stop there. So it's helped me to actually see this place differently as well as to change my writing too.
I think that the recentering of Blackness in my writing has just sort of like blown the doors open in terms of the possibilities and the things that I can write about. It's a slow process, but I am changing my sort of default like main character. Before, when I was younger, I used to be like white, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes kind of person, and now I'm just like, no, we're not writing that anymore. That's not who our main character is. That's not the story that we're telling. And it's kind of like a mental or creative insertion of someone who looks like me and has my experiences, and that matters, you know. It was just as, like, you know, as Bertrand said, that, you know, Black people are everywhere and can be everywhere, and the fact that we don't see ourselves is a construct. That was made that way on purpose. And whenever I, you know, find myself, you know, questioning or worried about, like, oh, like, you know, if I write a Black main character, what will other people think? I'm like, nope, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I get to tell that story, and I think, you know, why not? Why can't we have, you know, Black Victorian vampires in space? No, why not? Why not? Who's going to stop me? No one. But it also got me interested in, like, other forms of, like, Black-centered, like, literature. Like, I'm trying to find more books now on, like, the Black Gothic and that kind of, and those kinds of poetry, because my writing has been compared to that, into that tradition. I was like, oh, let me not pretend to know what that is. Let me go research. So it's just a constant, you know, expansion of the imagination. I'm not restricted by, you know, what the white mainstream says I should be writing or thinks I should be writing. And I'm still, you know, I don't do this, you know, naively. I'm still very aware that there are people who don't want me in this space, or who don't want my writing in this space. I think very clearly about the mess that happened with N.K. Jemisin when she won her big awards in the speculative awards, and people were very, very upset, or some people were very, very upset that she even dare take up that space. But I keep things like that in mind when I write, and that just makes me all the more determined to fulfill those goals and to be present. Representation isn't the end goal. There is still a lot further that we can do when we can go, but it's something that I can still use and I can still learn from.
You know, Brandon, I'm really sorry to jump in, but I have a question for Terese, just based on what I just heard, if you don't mind. So I find that really interesting, that you've been told that, you know, you're kind of like Black Gothic, right? And you're like, oh, really? Let me go and check that out. Because I'm always suspicious. Well, suspicious is the wrong word, but I'm always cautious when we are told, or we're given a box and we're told, hey, I think that's your box, right? But what it brought to mind was, I had forgotten this until you had spoken. When I first really started to love to read, it was sci-fi, fantasy, speculative fiction. That's what I got into first. And when I think back to that time, I think for me, the reason why I was really into it was that it did offer possibilities that my real world was cutting off for me. So things could just happen. Magical stuff could happen and things like that. And I left it instinctively, I think, because I didn't feel as though it was for me. At first I thought it was, and then I realized, oh, now it's not. So I'm curious. My question is twofold for you. Did you have a similar experience? Like, for you, was getting into that genre, was it a kind of escape, like I think it was for me? Could it be something else for you? And then secondly, no, secondly, I'm going to end there and I'll just let you answer the question, because I think you actually answered this other part of the question for me already.
Yeah, it was, I wouldn't say it was an escape. I mean, I read all sorts of things in general. I just really liked, you know, fantasy and sci-fi. Yeah. And I never left. But what did develop was a sort of cognitive dissonance, where I thought, well, I simultaneously thought, you know, Black people don't write this while being a Black person writing it. Or like Black people weren't allowed to do that while also, because that's what I was being told, right, or taught in school. While also, you know, going on my computer like at 1 a.m. and writing my little fairy tales, you know, about all, I was just, and that didn't come to a head until I discovered who Octavia Butler was. And it's like, oh, you know, how could I both claim that this is not something that Black people should be doing while also doing that thing? It was very, my brain broke. It was it was very strange. But what I most love about, you know, speculative literature is that possibility, especially like when we talk about futurity, you know, what Blackness looks like in the future. And Afrofuturism isn't a term that like everybody uses. And I feel like a lot of people sort of like you said, the labels, they're like, oh, a Black person writing a thing, Afrofuturism, immediately. But there's more, there's out there. I know one writer, Nadia Corford, does not use the term Afrofuturism because her work is Africa-centered, it's African-centered. She uses African futurism instead. But again, like there are more ways to sort of talk about the kind of writing that we do and that happens. And I'm just like ready to explore that. I don't know if this answers your question.
All answers and all questions are welcome. Yeah, please don't apologize. I welcome, I mean, it's a conversation, you know, so I welcome us asking questions of each other in whatever direction the energy flows. One thing that I'm hearing in our conversation so far is, notions or inklings of lineage and influence, you know, like the name Octavia Butler has come up, Dion Brand, who is like near and dear to my heart in a literary sense. I have a similar story as you, Bertrand, where like as an undergrad, I was inundated with lots of the literature of white men, and it was fine. I was doing my thing, and then somebody introduced in a Canadian literature course, they introduced Dion Brand to me, and I was like, ooh, because my mom is from Barbados and my dad is from Jamaica, and there was something in the rhythm of her poetics that like evoked the ocean for me. And I was like, I wasn't raised near the ocean, but I was raised by people who were raised, you know, near the sea and the ocean. And so there was something of me in the work. And it was the first time that I had that experience where I'm like, oh, I am here in ways that are even like subconscious or like kinetic, you know, physical, visceral, you know, and that literally changed the trajectory of my life as a writer, because I went to the library immediately and started reading as much Dion Brand as I could find. And it was the first time in university I read something that wasn't assigned, and it made me a much worse student of the institution and a much better student of poetry, because I knew I knew that I could find myself outside of the classroom, and that bolstered like my entire trajectory as a spoken word artist, just the sense that there was a place for me. And so I'm wondering then, if Dion Brand could do that for me, I'm wondering how conscious you all are of the notion of like Black literary lineage, writing yourself into conversation with your heroes or those who walk this path before you, and similarly, whether in being the writers and leaders and thoughtful human beings that you are, whether you're aware of creating space for those who are coming behind you, or Black writers who might read your work in the future. How does the notion of lineage factor into your aspirations as writers?
Okay, I can start. To be like completely honest, the awareness of literary lineage, which is a great term, I like that term, and my participation in it, it kind of comes and goes, depending on how I feel about my own writing and my own role in the space. Like sometimes I'm sure you are familiar with the concept of imposter syndrome. And I'm just realizing now, like, maybe this is race related. I don't know. Like I'll just be consumed with it, and I feel like, oh, I don't deserve to be in the same space as these wonderful, great writers, and my name dare not be in the same sentence as them. And in those moments, the desire to like isolate and kind of forget my community and forget this continuum is very strong. So I have to like bring myself back and remember that like my voice matters. It matters that I'm here, and being in community, I feel like almost is a necessity for like a writer who wants to publish. And I feel like it's a way for artists to support each other and lift each other up. So I try to do that when I'm supporting emerging writers or when I'm hosting events or reading series or making space for the people who will come after me. And I say this in like from like a temporal point of view, not so much like a craft perspective, if that makes sense. Like the people who will be writing in like 10, 20 years. And I find that sometimes I think less about participating in a lineage, and I think more about my contemporaries. So less of like who came before me and after me, but who's around me right now. And like, what are people doing right now, and how can I learn from them in different ways? I try to read as much as I can. And I know that, for a fact, I can learn from people like Lillian Allen and Dion Brand, but I can also learn a lot from people like Faith Archifal and LJ Ahenda, like people who are sort of in my generation, who are writing the same things I'm writing, who are sort of moving in the same spaces that I'm in. And I can revere them too and respect them too as much as I do sort of the people who came before me. But that being said, like I can name some people, like where where speculative poetry is concerned. I've found a lot more welcoming Black poets specifically. So I'll name them really quickly. Their names are Linda Addison, who's sort of like maybe the Dion Brand of speculative poetry. I'm not sure. She's very, very big, very influential. Akua Leslie Hope, and a Trinidadian poet named Brandon O'Brien, whose work I just absolutely love. And I consider these people like part of my lineage who came before me and who are still writing amazing work that I get to read and be a part of. But to answer, like, I think the second part of your question, I do think it's important to consider lineage because we're not writing in isolation, and our words do affect other people. I'm not particularly special or unique in my kind of way. I don't think I'm like this beautiful, amazing flower, and no one's ever done what I'm doing before. I stay humble. I try to stay humble, and I try to learn and educate myself on sort of the writers around me. And I also do this through editing. I'm most aware of the way my writing, or writing in general, affects communities when I'm helping other people shape their work so they can share their writing with their communities. It's all very interesting to me.
Yeah, that was incredible. I'm just wondering if we can get like a transcript or something of this recording, because I don't know those names and I would love to go and check those out now.
We are recording the event, so we can definitely zoom back later on.
That's fantastic. So Brandon, this is the one question that I did have to write things down because I have a bunch of names to throw out here. And two things that Terese said that I find resonate with me very strongly. First of all, the imposter syndrome. Yep, I think there is definitely something going on there that, particularly with racialized people, I think there's definitely something going on. And I would be a liar if I said I didn't feel it at least 3 times this week with 3 different events I had to be at. And I'm not even kidding you one bit. I did an event even earlier today, and I was thinking, how is this possible? And I had to kick myself into gear to do it. So there's definitely something going on there. I also resonate with your struggle with what is a lineage exactly? And what I'm hearing from you is that the lineage doesn't have to be linear necessarily. And that's definitely something that I also, that's how I feel for sure. And for me, that is the case because on the prairies, a Black prairie literary lineage, I was told anyway, doesn't exist. There's nothing there. And so I kind of created my lineage, and it's less a lineage than it is a kind of, what did I call it here? Clustered communities. That's it. It's a clustered community. So it's my community that I created. And in doing so, I think I have invented a kind of lineage that does suit me and that maybe will suit others as well. I don't know about that. But the clusters involve historical ancestors, diasporic ancestors, literary genres that have influenced me, poetic ancestors, And then, yeah, and then this spatial, geographical ancestors as well. So being here on the prairies. So I start with Ralph Ellison. I'm going to list off all my names now. Okay. Yeah. So I start with, yeah. you know, you'll probably know most of these names actually. Okay. So I start with Ralph Ellison because he's from Oklahoma and he belongs to my historical, believe it or not, my historical cluster. Okay, so he's from Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is one of what I call a point of origin for the Black Prairies. Because at the beginning of the 20th century, that's when many of these African Americans left the American South, and they moved to the Western Canada to homestead and to farm, and there are communities of them. And that's part of the history I was never taught, right? I had to discover that sort of thing. So Oklahoma was one of these states. It was the state where most of them or many of them came at once from. And he's from there, and he's born around the time that these people are moving up here. And so I feel like, you know, had he just been like born to slightly different family, he may have come up here as well. And so for me, he is one of these, one of my ancestors who belongs to that historical origin. He also, obviously, he wrote The Invisible Man, and the topic itself resonates very strongly with that erasure of history and that sort of thing that I engage. So it feels fitting to me. I also have my African-American diasporic ancestors. And for me, these are ancestors because they're involved in certain movements that resonate with me. And they're pioneers within their movements. And I want to be a kind of pioneer, at least, yeah, I do. I want to be a kind of pioneer. But I don't mean that in the way it sounds, right? I want to invoke history again. That's my thing. Okay, and so Black homesteaders were Black pioneers who came here, and I want to align myself with that. I want to be a Black pioneer on the literary front out here. And so people like Langston Hughes, who helped to start the Harlem Renaissance, but was also born in the Missouri prairies and was raised in Kansas as well. So is a kind of prairie boy himself, even though he's so famously associated with the Harlem Renaissance. Gwendolyn Brooks, who was part of that early modernist period of African-American literature as well, a pioneer herself. She too was born in Kansas before she moved to Chicago. So again, prairie girl. Who else is on my list there? Oh, August Wilson. Okay, August Wilson, not really a prairie boy, really, though he did live in Minnesota for many years, and so that kind of counts. But ambitious in creating this 10-place cycle of African-American life that goes across the entire 20th century. So a play for each decade of the century. That kind of ambitious insertion of Blackness into history totally appeals to me and makes me feel like he is one of those pioneers as well. So that's my African-American pioneer ancestors that I link to. And then I have just Black prairie writers that nobody knows about. Again, historical writers. Era Bell Thompson, she's from North Dakota, a Black woman from North Dakota who was writing, she was born in 1905, and she was writing in the 1920s and 30s as well. She has a biography out there, it was published in the 1940s. Emmanuel Taylor Gordon, who is a singer, he sang in the Harlem Renaissance, but he also wrote a biography as well. He's from Montana. He was born and raised in Montana. So people like that are also my kind of Black prairie ancestors. And then in the genres in poetry, I've got, you know, my Dion Brands come in, but also I have Wade Compton, I have George Eliot Clark, very specifically though, because these are people who also tried to carve out a kind of Black regional space, Africadian in the case of George Eliot Clark, and then the West Coast with Wade, how did I just forget his last name all of a sudden? Compton, Wade Compton. I just forgot all of a sudden, yeah. And I know him too. And then that brings me to my geographical space right here. And here there are several writers who have been ignored, but have made an impact that I look to and that I touch, that act as my touchstone. We'll start with Essie Adujian, who we all know now that she's from Calgary, but look at what she has done. And her early work was focused on and located on the prairies. But also Cheryl Fogo, who is for me the heart of the Black prairies. She is an actual descendant of those Black pioneers who moved from Oklahoma and has done all kinds of work in all the genres here. Suzette Meyer as well, who's produced amazing novels from out here. Claire Harris, fantastic Trinidadian poet who had located herself here and was international award winning from here in Calgary. These people for me are my regional ancestors, even though some of them are still, in fact, all of them except for Claire Harris are still alive. But those are my touchstones. And I create that cluster in the hope that, when my work, I try to speak those authors through. I refer to them and I bring them out. And I hope that people coming after me can recognize the validity of this historic and genre and diasporic presence that can also belong to them as well. Stop there.
What a masterclass of articulation and breadth just now, which is not to which is not to call you verbose, but to say I'm grateful for the absolute breadth of that family tree, because it is. I mean, what question do I need to ask now? You said it, you laid it out, and I appreciate too, Terese, in your response, or just across both answers, the ways that each of you honored those who you consider your peers, in the sense of oh yeah, I was in a room with them yesterday, or that's my homie, I see them around the way, and these people that we think of as being on a certain pantheon or pedestal, because it is precisely that. You need both. If I or we just sat in a room and read Dion Brand but never talked to a Black poet in our community, or never found our Wade Compton doing his thing in Vancouver, we'd be less rich for it. So I feel like those answers so beautifully summed up what I hoped would be the spirit of this conversation. So I'm going to ask another question, but please know that I'm already full. I'm satisfied. I'm going to ask this question because I think both of your answers kind of set up this inquiry. And Bertrand, you've answered this question in so many ways already, but I'm interested in this regional sense that you were mentioning, and how it influences you, Terese, writing from what I think is the backdrop or the location of Toronto, or the greater Toronto area, and then also Caribbean lineage. And for you, Bertrand, as someone who's been around, been in the UK, born in Africa, how or to what extent those regionalities are also carried with you as you think about the impact or the legacy that you're leaving. I'll start with Terese, I think.
Yeah, I was born in Mississauga, and I lived in the Caribbean briefly as a child. My parents are from Grenada, so we lived in Grenada for 1 year. Just had a house, went to school, everything, and we moved to Trinidad for 2 years. And these are the spaces where my parents grew up. They were already very familiar with the culture. They had family there, and I was just some Canadian child living there. So it was quite an interesting period of my life, and I learned a lot about myself, even as a child, in terms of the way in which I want to let those experiences affect me. I won't posit to be, any kind of expert on, the culture or the history or the politics of the Caribbean or even Grenada. But I had grown up, even while living in Canada, with my parents sort of telling me stories and reading to me, the mythology and the folklore of the various islands. And when I spoke earlier about how I didn't perceive of Black people writing speculative literature, folklore and myth didn't count. I was that's not speculative. that just exists, that's just real, you know. I enjoyed like authors, oh, what's his name? Ricardo Keynes Douglas, I think, who's is a children's writer. And I read all his books when I was a kid, and I really loved how he would sort of bring the myths to life. And he was one of the writers who made me interested in the Caribbean as a site of, you know, spirituality and magic and softness, and also resistance. I realized that these were children's books, so you can't really get into like details. But as an adult, I can research these things. So in my speculative poetry, I want to sort of do my own exploring of the mythology of the Caribbean. My second chapbook, Manifest, kind of explores that a little bit. And I kind of just let myself, you know, imagine and like, oh, like, what if this? And, you know, what if we went to this space instead? And I want to do so carefully, but still openly and excitedly, and with and willingness to learn. Where Canada is concerned, because I've spent the most amount of time in my life in Canada. I was born here. I'm still very interested in literature, speculative literature, or just literary fiction that is set here, especially written by people of color. And I feel like that interest is sort of a pushback against, you know, what I learned in university. My degree wasn't it wasn't English or literature, it was bioethics. But when I would take creative writing classes, I wanted to be a doctor for a very long time. When I took, you know, creative writing classes, the things that we would read, all, you know, interesting, fun, short stories, but I just didn't see myself reflected. So I started wondering, like, what were Black people doing in Canada? Because I'm not seeing this in the literature that I'm reading. Like, what's happening? We're all here. I see people. What's going on? And especially in contemporary spaces, like large cities, the prairies. I wasn't seeing myself, and so I became very interested in learning and looking at these kinds of literatures, and where they might take me, specifically within speculative literature, because I can go now and like find, you know, Black writers of literary fiction of all stripes. Not a lot, of course, but I can still go and find them. And I wasn't able to see that within speculative literature. I realized this when I was working with the magazine that I help run, and we're sort of like asking people to, you know, attend or to be panelists at our conference. We're like, where are the Black people? Like, the speculative literature conference, like what's happening? Like this Can spec scene is still very white. So I'm always trying to find more spaces and places for Black writers, because I know we exist. I know we're out here. You know, we might not be as famous as, I don't know, I can't name anyone right now. They're all escaped my brain. I don't know, Cory Doctorow or someone like that. But you know, but we're here. I took that as an opportunity to sort of find more people. And I want to consider Canada, because I'm from here, and Toronto specifically, as like a landscape and a nest for my stories, because I just haven't seen them. If you know of any, and people in the audience, please let me know. I would like to read some Black speculative literature set in Toronto. If you can find any, please let me know. But that's kind of where sort of location and region influence a lot of my work.
Again, wow. I've been taking notes while you're speaking, Terese, because it's so rich, and so many things for me to follow up on. Manifest, huh? I want to read Manifest. Okay, so for me, I think a lot of what Terese said, again, really does strongly resonate with me. The key thing that I just want to start out with here is, you know, earlier, Terese, when you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I said that resonates with me definitely, and I think it's a Black experience for sure. I mean, our presences are always wrongful. I mean, we're either absent or wrong, right? And so, yeah, you're always coming up against that. But for me, traveling around and the trajectory of my life has shown me that spaces like this is the process that my life has drawn me to. And that is the reaffirming place, the place where the space where the ideas, the language, the affirmations all suit and they all fit. And so everything that we're going through today, it's just like Brandon said, this is, I'm already full, right? This has been incredible. This is the sort of thing that I aim for in the spaces that I create through literature, but we've just done it here. So I don't think that it's fair that we feel like we're imposters, definitely not. But I think that we should embrace these moments here. And so that's why I want to acknowledge, I'm taking notes when you speak, Terese. I'm thinking about everything you're saying because it is absolutely resonating with me, and I want to carry that with me forward. Same with your questions, Brandon, and your approach to this. I want to embrace it and carry it forward. I find it absolutely enriching and absolutely edifying. So my short answer to your question is when I was abroad, I re-envisioned what it would be like to be from the prairies. Because when I was in the prairies, I was not allowed to be from the prairies. So when I was abroad, there's a famous statement that Stuart Hall, a Jamaican British writer, made, in which he said that there was no such thing as a West Indian identity until all these West Indians moved to the UK and to London and started to interact together. And so people who were from Jamaica were now mixed with people from Trinidad, from people from Barbados, and they were all here in this English space. And that created a kind of West Indian identity. And from that, it allowed them to start to articulate, what does it mean to have a sense of freedom as ourselves, as who we are ourselves. And I think something like that happened to me living abroad. I was in all these other places, and that made me look back at Canada and rethink Canada. And then when I came back here, I felt now I know how to be free in this place because I can see it for what it is for. And I'll just leave my answer at that because I go on and on too much. And I think, it's been a rich enough discussion without just hearing me blabber, essentially. And I truly, truly appreciate the opportunity to have shared this space with you guys. And as I said, I'm going to be looking stuff up, and I'm going to be reading manifests, and I'm going to be doing all kinds of things now. All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, your timing is impeccable. We've reached I guess 7 o'clock Eastern and 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific where I am in Vancouver. So I mean, there are so many things to say. I wanna just thank you both for the richness of everything that's already been said. I feel like we've created the beginnings of a reading list, or like I don't know who's gonna bring it together, but the number of names referenced, even though I'm familiar with like a good majority of them. What I want to say is that this conversation makes me grateful that both of you are students of literature in the ways that you are, and they make me also want to be a better student because the nature of writing is to be a reader. The nature of being a writer is to be studying always, and so thank you for the humility of your study and the way that it's imbued this space with so much brilliance, truthfully. And so now we're just going to take some questions from the audience. Thank you, audience members, for your kind words and for your wonderful questions. The first question I see is from Carrie Bell, and Nick and Laura. If I miss a question or if there's something I don't see, you can just like feel free to hop in and fill in that gap. But Carrie asks, what advice do you have for occupying spaces saturated with the mediocre white males who have nothing important to say or impart on or off the page? That's a juicy one. So I'll just what advice do you have for occupying spaces that are saturated with a certain kind of white male ethos or presence? I mean, go ahead.
Oh man, because I was a philosophy major, so lots of white males talking about about things, little import. Looking back on my life, I guess, on my time in those spaces, I think the advice that I would give now is that it's very, very important, if at all, if you can, sort of find your people. To find, if you're in, say if you're in an academic space, like a university, and it took me a long time, like when I say your people, I mean like, people who look like you, people who share your experiences. That might be difficult. I was able to find this space not through academia, but through literature. So I was not surrounded in my degrees with by Black people. I did not see them. I went to York University for my master's, and there were lots of people of color at York, but not in my program. So I had to go and outside and be, okay, well, how can I, for my peace of mind and for my strength, and to combat that imposter syndrome, I needed to be around people who were affirming, and who let me know and supported me that I deserve to be here, because I wasn't getting that from my formal education in those spheres. I went to University of Toronto for my undergrad. I know that there are lots of Black organizations like the Black Students Union and the Caribbean Students Union, but it was too late for me to sort of involve myself in those spaces, because I was already, by the time I discovered that the Black Student Union existed, it was like my tail end of my 4th year. I was like, what was I doing? So so don't make my mistakes. Try to surround yourself if you can, and it might be difficult, with other Black students and other Black professionals or people who sort of are around you. It's going to do wonders for your mental health.
I don't have too much more to add to that. I think that is all very sound advice. I think that one element that I'll address there is, there are a couple ways of looking at the question. And one is, what do I do being in this space in which I am seen as a challenge somehow, right? And how do I survive that? And I think Terese's answers have really addressed that very well. You have to kind of find your tribe. And sometimes that's an actual physical tribe. It's a group of people and you go and you connect with. And sometimes it's just the right books or, just being aware of certain things that you surround yourself with. And then there's another side to the question, which I think has more to do with the inner quality, just something within you that you have to address. And we all have to address it because, let's face it, one common experience that Black Canadians have is encountering and at some point being surrounded by whiteness. And so we have to deal with it at some point somewhere. And for that, I would suggest that the feelings that I have been getting from being in this space here is what you have to remind yourself of. And that is, as Terese said earlier, Black people exist, like we're here. Right? We do all kinds of different things. We're everywhere. If the evidence is not in front of you, you have to hold faith in that. And yes, you will be seen as a challenge, but that can be a good thing. You can be a challenge to their space by simply being there, just by being in their space. So there was a time in which I was young in which I felt like I had to have like dreadlocks or long braids, and I had to like make my presence felt, make the Blackness of my presence felt in order to challenge spaces. And other times I've felt like, well, no, I'm just going to, speak properly, and I'm going to wear kind of clothes like I'm wearing right now, and I'm just going to be there, right? And I realize that both of those can be effective ways of challenging that space. So it comes down to being okay with yourself and just realizing that, yeah, you exist, right? And the problem is with them. And I know this is like a kind of simplistic, kind of aphoristic way of looking at it, right? The problem is with them. But remember, I'm just looking at the one side of the challenge, and Terese has dealt with the other side, right? So if you remember that the problem was with them, whatever you do is challenging them. They need to be challenged. They need that. They need your Blackness in their space. They need you to be reading Shakespearean sonnets or standing on the stage, acting in a Shakespearean play, or being the CEO of their very white software corporation or whatever it is. They need you in that space because your presence, yes, is challenging them, and that's negative, but it's also absolutely positive.
Yeah, so well said. I mean, this could be a panel discussion on its own, like, you know, interacting with whiteness and surviving as a Black person in Canada. So there are things that I could say, but I'll keep it moving. Nick Brewer, who is part of the organizing of this event, thank you, Nick, for your work and bringing us all together. Nick asks, it's amazing to hear about these literary lineages and contemporary influences, and I would love to know what Bertrand and Terese feel they are leaving and may leave or teach or inspire with the work they're creating now. So I guess it's another question about lineages and sort of your place in the continuum of Black writing. What do you imagine you're leaving behind?
I can answer this one fairly quickly because I think that I've kind of dealt with this before. But because when I grew up, I thought that I was impossible. What I'm hoping to leave is the recognition for people coming up after me that they are possible, that what it is that they want to achieve is possible. So that's it. It's as simple as that. I want them to see the possibility.
Bertrand stole my answer. No, it's great. I like just making my presence known and obvious as well. And I do this, I think, more within the speculative literature scene, which is, as I mentioned, so very white. Like I thought Canada was white. Speculative is like so white. I was, oh my God. And so I go and I speak at, you know, conferences, and I share my resources, and I go up to people, or I try to meet people online and say like, hi, I'm here and I'm doing this. And there was a time when I thought that I couldn't do this, that I couldn't be here, and that I couldn't take up this space. And I want to let you know that you deserve to be here too. And if I can just even, you know, affect or positively influence one person, that's enough for me. But being, you know, having the kind of personality I have is very sort of like bubbly and extrovert. I'm everywhere. I'm trying to do all the things to my detriment, as we talked about before this panel. But you know, I'm I'm always here. So that's kind of something that I want to sort of leave for people coming up after me. I want more Black writers, and I want more Black artists in the future. There should always be more and visible. Yeah.
It seems like the perfect place to end, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you both for your presence. Thank you for the possibilities you suggest by being here. Thank you for your intellect. Thank you for your study. Thank you for your generosity. Yeah, I'm overjoyed. What a way to spend what a way to spend a Saturday. So thank you to both of you for all that you've given. Thank you to the Canadian League of Poets for inviting us to be here, because I feel like this discussion sort of testifies to the sort of meaning making and connection making that we've all sort of been gesturing at through the conversation. So I'm happy to befriend you both in this way, and hopefully, you know, we can continue discussing these things and other things. So with that said, thank you to the Canadian League of Poets. Thank you to everyone who has been an audience member tonight. And I wish you the best of everything. Peace and love.